they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread, and in prayers. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders, and all that believed were together and had all things common. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity.
Well, good morning, North Point. Good to see you this morning. And man, it's always a fun Sunday to have kids up on stage. You never know what's going to happen, but it's just exciting to have them up here and to see them sing songs about Jesus. I'm thankful for everybody that worked hard this week to volunteer. I think we had over 75 volunteers, you that were here helping to serve them and point them to Jesus this week. So that was awesome. VBS also means that it's summertime, and like we are well into summer now. Last week, Tuesday was summer solstice, right? The longest Sunday of the year, also maybe one of the hottest days of the year. Got a little reprieve this morning for that. But summer also means usually travel, right? That you're going to do family trips, you're going to do vacations, you're going to leave your home, you're going to go to other places and hopefully get refreshed and renewed. You may have to sell a kidney in order to pay for gas, but hopefully you'll be able to go on your trips, get refreshed, get renewed. There's another type of travel though, and that is travel for mission. And particularly the mission of Jesus. And this has been around for a really long time. That when Jesus gave this command, he said, hey, look, this is my mission. I want my message to go to the ends of the earth. Throughout the history of the church, throughout our story as followers of Jesus, people have done that. They have gone out from their home, their place, their comfort in order to spread the message of Jesus really around the world. Now, some of you have done that in what we call missions trips, like short-term trips where you leave your home for a little period of time and you go to South America, you go to Haiti, you go to Mexico, you go over to Asia or Africa somewhere to be able to do that. That's an awesome part of it. But there's also another part of that, and that is when missionaries decide that they are going to move their entire lives from their place, their home, their comfort zone, and they're going to give their lives for the sake of Jesus' mission to take his message around the world. And at NorthPoint, we have a number of missions partners that are like this. We have missions partners right now that are doing this in the Middle East and in Africa and in Indonesia and in parts of the world that we're not even able to talk about because of how dangerous it is for them to be in those places. So here's the thing. When Jesus gives us his mission, he wants all of us to be engaged and to be involved in that. We have different roles in what that looks like. So for all of us, Jesus wants us to care about and love the people that are in our local environment, we might say in our Jerusalem, to love our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, our classmates, and to share Jesus, his message and his love with them. Sometimes we get an opportunity to participate in short-term mission trips, and that's an awesome experience as well, and hopefully advances Jesus' mission. And then as a church, as followers of Jesus, we help to send people to the ends of the earth as well. So we're sharing in our local context and supporting those that are going all around the world through prayer, through encouragement, through financial support, all of those means. Well, today, as we turn to Acts chapter 13 in our origin story, if you got a Bible, take it and turn there. Page 894, the Bible's in front of you. What we're going to see today is travel for mission, particularly what we call the missionary journeys of Paul. So Jesus' message to the ends of the earth is off and running. Paul and Barnabas are sent to do this, and we're going to look today at Paul's first missionary journey. This first missionary journey of Paul, taking his message to the ends of the earth, happens in Acts chapter 13 and Acts chapter 14. I'm going to cover half of that today. We'll cover half of it next Sunday. There's three big missionary journeys in the gospel, or in the book of Acts, and what we're going to do today is follow Paul's route, and we're going to talk about how do we partner in Jesus' mission. What does that look like for us in our local context and also in helping to send others out for you and I to partner in the mission of Jesus? And we're going to nerd out a little bit because we don't always do maps, but we're going to do, I looked at the face, they're like, I don't know about that. So, all right, so we got maps. I got lots of maps for you today. We're going to go through them pretty quickly, but we are going to do the maps. For those of you that don't like maps and you don't like geography, I don't know, just enjoy the pictures, I guess, for a little bit this morning, all right? Just think of them as pictures. So here's the deal. Here's where we're going to start off in the world, just to get your bearings a little bit. Some of you, this still is not going to help you, but at least just, you see, find the boot. There's Italy, okay? And then if we would go around down south and then come around, we've got Africa. You see where Egypt is, Israel, modern-day Turkey and Greece and the Mediterranean Sea. We're going to circle in on this region, which is going to be where Paul's first missionary journey takes place. And in this first area, as we zoom in there, you've got now Turkey to the north, Israel to the south, and then you see this island of Cyprus. So what happens is that Paul and Barnabas are in Antioch, leading that church. We call it Syrian Antioch, when God's Spirit speaks to them and says, I want you to send Barnabas and Saul out for the sake of mission. We're going to take my message to the ends of the earth. And so the church decides to do that. Once they are sent out with prayer, with support, with encouragement as well, they take this young guy, John Mark, with them, and they head for the port of Seleucia. As they go to the port of Seleucia, so they're in Syrian Antioch, they go to Seleucia, and then from Seleucia, they board a ship, and they go to Barnabas's home island, the place that he is from. And so they're going to sail from Seleucia to the east side of the island of Cyprus on Salamis. As they land in this port of Salamis, then they're going to make their way across the island of Cyprus to Paphos. So they're doing like a preaching circuit, going from the east side of the island to the west side of the island. And notice their pattern, the pattern that they take as they travel across this island in verse 5. It says this: when they arrived at Salamis, they proclaimed the word of God in the Jewish synagogues, and John was with them as their helper. Now, they go to the Jewish synagogues because the synagogues are the center of religious and social and community life for the Jewish people. And so it makes sense that they would go to the Jews first at the center of their religious and social life, because the Jews are God's chosen people, right? The scriptures come through the Jews, the Old Testament scriptures. Jesus was Jewish. This is first and foremost a Jewish message, which now is going to go out to the rest of the world. And so probably what Barnabas and Saul are thinking is, we'll go to the Jewish people in their synagogues, a number of them will believe in Jesus, and together we'll take the message to the Gentile population. So that's their method, that's what they choose to do. Now, when they got to Paphos, they encounter two guys here. They encounter the Roman leader over the island and then his evil advisor. And it's like, whoa, ha, ha, ha. That's what you should feel like when you see his evil advisor. When I read this, I was thinking about the Lord of the Rings, King Theoden and Grima Wormtongue, okay? So again, we're just really nerdy today. So some of you cringe when we talk Lord of the Rings. But for those of you that know that, there's a scene there where there is King Theoden, he's over one of the human realms, and he's got an evil advisor that corrupts him. And throughout the movie, you see the physical appearance of King Theoden gets more decrepit, more old, more vile, more messed up, because this evil advisor is whispering deceptions and control and all of these things into his ear. That's what you have going on here with this Roman leader and his evil advisor. So check out what happens when Paul and Barnabas get there. Verse 7, the second half says this: the proconsul, that's King Theoden, okay, the Roman guy, an intelligent man, he sent for Barnabas and Saul because he wanted to hear the word of God. But Elymas, that's Wormtongue, the sorcerer, he opposed them and tried to turn the proconsul from the faith. Then Saul, who was also called Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, looked straight at Elymas and said, "You are a child of the devil and an enemy of everything that is right. You are full of all kinds of deceits and trickery. Will you never stop perverting the right ways of the Lord?" Hey, I'm Paul. Elymas, nice to meet you. Glad we're here. Can we talk? No, he doesn't do that at all, right? He just brings it from the beginning, and he calls the guy a child of the devil. Then he says this in verse 11. "Now the hand of the Lord is against you. You are going to be blind for a time, not even able to see the light of the sun." Immediately, mist and darkness came over him. He groped about, seeking someone to lead him by the hand. When the proconsul saw what had happened, he believed, for he was amazed at the teaching about the Lord. Now, there's a few things that are going on here. The first thing, which is super cool, is that this is the first non-Jewish proselyte convert to Jesus. Up to this point, we've had some people that weren't Jewish come to faith in Jesus, but they already followed God. They already had an affinity towards God. This Roman guy, we have no indication that he followed or worshiped our God at all. And when Paul preaches the message to him and he sees this thing happen with his servant, he's like, yes, I believe in Jesus. So the mission to the ends of the earth is going now. Like, it is off and running. That's awesome. But there's also a couple of other things going on here that help us with how we should participate in the mission of Jesus. And the first thing we see from Paul as he gets to the island and he encounters these two guys is that we should not relish a fight. We shouldn't look for a fight, but we shouldn't run from it either. You see that in Paul, right? You notice that Paul takes on Elymas. Luke says that he was a sorcerer, that he was into the occult, that he is a false prophet. And Paul calls him out for that. He won't let it go. There are things to confront. There are things that we need to stand against. Even at times there are people that we need to confront and stand against, as Paul does here. Now, we'll notice in Paul's life that Paul doesn't do this with everybody, and he's not doing it all the time. Like he has a chip on his shoulder, and he's just looking for a fight, and he's trying to make things very difficult. No. But when someone stands in the way of truth, when someone stands in the way of other people hearing about the message of Jesus, then it's go time. And I think what this gets at is what you and I are passionate about. What are those things in our lives that you really have a lot of energy for, that you get excited about? What are the things that you get angry about, upset about? What do you get frustrated about? What gets you going? Do we tend to get upset and aggressive about our preferences? About our rights, about our comforts, about conveniences? Anybody ever done this? Oh, I told them what is up. You're telling a story about how you told off that customer service representative. I let them have it. People aren't going to treat me that way. I just let them know I gave them a piece of my mind, right? Which I might remind us, if you keep giving people a piece of your mind, you're not going to have any left, right? So got to be careful about doing that. And look, there are things in life that are frustrating, and there's appropriate ways to handle those things. But at the end of the day, my point is this: are we most passionate about what Jesus is most passionate about? Are we passionate about the things that he is concerned about? Are we passionate about his message, people hearing his message and finding hope and life in him? That's what gets Paul here. He says, you are standing in the way of someone hearing the message of Jesus. That is evil. You are a child of the devil and being influenced by him. Now, I wouldn't encourage you to go around telling people that they're children of the devil. Probably not the best tactic for you and I today, right? But there are times when we need to confront injustice and evil and things that are wrong. Now, we're going to need discernment for when to do that. And we need the courage to make sure with Jesus' help that we're doing it for the right motives, but we need to do it. Don't relish a fight. Make sure that you're fighting for the right things, but don't run when it's time to stand. That's the first thing Paul shows us. The second thing he shows us is this, that we should celebrate those who accept the message, and we should expect that quite a few people are going to reject the message. We celebrate the acceptors, and we expect there will be rejectors. This happens in every place that the message of Jesus goes. And I think that you know this, right? When Paul goes on to this island, the Roman leader accepts the message. Apparently a number of other people accept the message. But Elymas and a number of other people, they oppose it. They're against the message of Jesus. So for us, instead of being discouraged by not always being well-liked, and not everybody accepting us, not always having favor with people, or maybe even being rejected or persecuted at times or made fun of for our faith, instead of worrying about that, we just celebrate those who do accept the message. We celebrate those who do get baptized, those who do trust in Jesus, those who follow him, those who are willing to give us an audience. And at the same time, we expect that there's going to be a number of people that are going to make fun of us, that are not going to agree with us, that are going to characterize us in a wrong way. Do you know if you're a follower of Jesus today, there's a lot of people that are going to think you're crazy or stupid, right? That's just the way that it's going to be. You know what? Jesus said it's going to be this way. He said to us, if they persecuted me, they'll persecute you also. But I'm with you. I've got your back. The Father loves you. I'm going to strengthen you and support you and guide you. But just know that living in this world, it's going to be like that. So think about this. Like for us, if being fully accepted by the world, honored by the world, is our goal, we're always going to be disappointed. We're always going to be on the outside of that in some way. No, it doesn't mean that we should try to get the world to hate us. It doesn't mean that we should be jerks, that we should be overly aggressive. Remember, we're not looking for a fight in that way, but sometimes it is going to come, and we should expect that that's going to happen at times. Very early on, as Paul starts off on his missionary journeys, this is the way that it begins, and he doesn't freak out. He just expects it to be this way. And it's like Paul had this attitude that, hey, my role is to share the gospel of Jesus with people. My goal is to love people and to do what God's called me to do and let him take care of the results. Let him take care of what's going to happen. Look at verse 48. After he goes to another town and gives the message, look at this response. Verse 48 says, when the Gentiles heard this, the message of Jesus was for them, they were glad and they honored the word of the Lord. And then get this, and all who were appointed for eternal life believed. What do you think that means? All who were appointed for eternal life believed? Who does it look like is responsible for people's response to Jesus? Who does it look like is responsible for making people trust in Jesus and believe in him? That's on God's plate. That's not on your plate, right? That's not on my plate. We do our role, we love people, we share Jesus with them, and we expect God to take care of that. It's on his plate. So for us, like at NorthPoint, what this means is when people get baptized, when people ask you about your church, they ask you about your faith, they show interest in Jesus, we celebrate that. We talk with them about that. We take advantage of those opportunities with them. And at the same time, when you turn on the television and you're misrepresented as a follower of Jesus, you're characterized, or people make fun of you, or they say that you're stupid, or only dumb people still believe that God exists. You just step back from that. That's not easy, but you step back from that and you say, you know what? Jesus said it was going to be this way. He said that this was going to happen, and that's on his plate to handle it. Just keep loving, just keep sharing Jesus, and trust him to do what is best. Now look, I imagine that there are a number of you that are here today that you have a friend or a family member that fits into this category of they don't trust Jesus. They've rejected him, or they've fallen away from their faith in him. Sometimes it's easier when there's people out there that reject Jesus and reject us. It is a lot harder when they live in your home or when they share your last name. That's rather difficult. I know that some of you are so burdened by this, you feel it so deeply. It's because you love them. You care about them. You know what Jesus means to you. You know that he is the light of the world. You know that they need to trust in him and believe in him. But let me tell you today, Jesus sees your heart. He hears your prayers, and that's on his plate. Trust him to do what is best. Keep loving them, but know that you can't coerce somebody. You can't make them believe. You can't control them into believing Jesus. It's not on you. It's in his hands. Trust him and rest in him. That's what Paul shows us here. He expects that he goes to this island that some people will believe, some people will reject, and he keeps moving forward. The second thing he shows us. Now back to our map. Let's get back to where Paul and Barnabas are at. They were in Paphos on the western side of the island when all of that takes place. They get on another ship and now they sail up to a town called Perga. Perga is in southern Galatia. And Galatia is going to become a major part of Paul's ministry and his work on a number of his missionary journeys. Eventually, he will write some letters back to the churches of Galatia, all these cities that he's going to visit. One of the first letters Paul ever wrote, the book of Galatians. We have it in our New Testament. And notice a couple of things that happen when they get here to Perga. Verse 13, it says, from Paphos, Paul and his companions sailed to Perga in Pamphylia, where John left them to return to Jerusalem. So a couple of things happen here. First of all, it went so quick, maybe you didn't catch it, but now Luke, who's writing this, says Paul and his companions. So he switches. Up to this point, it had been Barnabas and Saul. Now it's Paul and his companions. What happened there? Well, two things. One, apparently Barnabas said, look, Paul, this is your show. You're the apostle to the Gentiles. You're the primary leader. You take over now, which is awesome. That Barnabas saw his role, he saw Paul's role, and he let Paul take the lead. The second thing you notice is that up to this point, Paul has been called Saul. Saul is his Hebrew name. Paul is his Greek name. Now, why would he start going by his Greek name? It wasn't probably, as some of you have maybe heard before, that Saul, the great persecutor of the church, became Paul, the apostle, missionary to the Gentile, when Jesus changed his name. Jesus didn't change his name. They were just two different forms of his name, one in Hebrew and one in Greek. Why would he start going by his Greek name? Well, maybe because he was the apostle to the Gentiles, to take the message to the Greeks, to the ends of the earth. And it may not be unlike, say, a Chinese student coming to the United States to study in high school. And when they get there, they're like, hey, well, I'm in America now, and these people are never going to be able to pronounce my name, so I'm going to take an American name, right? Because that's where I'm at right now. Or when you took high school Spanish, and you went into high school Spanish as John, and the teacher's like, no, you're going to be Jose now, right? You switch over based on the context. So that's probably what is going on with Paul here. The second thing you maybe noticed in verse 13 is that John Mark leaves them. He abandons them. Later on, Luke is going to say that he deserted them. And we don't exactly know why. He was maybe homesick. He was maybe fearful. He was maybe physically sick, and he wanted to go back home. But what we do know is that this becomes a source of major conflict between Paul and Barnabas. Mark was probably Barnabas' cousin, so he has a family connection to him. And when he deserts him, Paul and Barnabas later on, we'll do this message, we'll see this. They have a big conflict and a clash with each other, which is interesting to us as we study the book of Acts, and it shows us that even our heroes of the faith had interpersonal conflict. So that's probably something else that we should expect at times that we're going to have to work through. Even as followers of Jesus, Paul and Barnabas had to do that. More on that in the future. Let's get back to our map. The next part they go, after Perga and these couple of things happen, they go north to a city called Pisidian Antioch, two Antiochs in the ancient world, Syrian Antioch, where the mission was launched from, and then Pisidian Antioch. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. But from Pisidian Antioch, they go kind of south and east to another Roman town called Iconium. Then they go south from Iconium to two small towns called Lystra and Derbe. We'll look at those next week. And then once they get to Derbe, this is the last city they go to on the first missionary journey. Paul and Barnabas will make a circuit back from Derbe to Lystra, Iconium, Pisidian Antioch, Perga, and then they'll go over to a western town called Attalia, which is actually where the port was, and they'll sail back to Seleucia and then go back to Syrian Antioch. And that completes the first missionary journey. Thrilling and exciting, I know, for many of you. All right. So here's the deal. I want to go back to Pisidian Antioch because that's most of what Paul talks about, or rather Luke talks about in chapter 13 of Acts. And we're going to see a few more things here about participating in Jesus' mission. When they arrive there in Pisidian Antioch, notice what happens in verse 14. It says, from Perga they went to Pisidian Antioch. On the Sabbath they entered the synagogue and sat down. Remember, that was their practice. We're going to go to synagogues first. We're going to start with the Jews, and then we'll go on from there. After the reading from the law and the prophets, the leaders of the synagogue sent word to them, saying, brothers, if you have a word of exhortation for the people, please speak. Now, why do you think Paul would be asked to speak in this synagogue? Well, if we know a little bit about Paul's history, Paul was a Pharisee. He was a rabbi. He was trained and educated in one of the best schools of the day. Some commentators have suggested that maybe even he was wearing the garb of a rabbi so that when he went into the synagogue, the other leaders there were like, oh, this is somebody important. We should give him an opportunity to speak. Whatever it was, when Paul is asked to speak, he says, all right, I've got a message for you. He takes advantage of the opportunity and maybe even uses a little bit of wisdom and discernment about how do I get a hearing with these people, right? Maybe by what he wears and certainly by where he goes. He's looking for an opportunity, and then he takes advantage of the opportunity, which is the third thing we see about partnering in the mission of Jesus. We should look for and take advantage of opportunities to share our faith, to share a reason for the hope that is within us. Look, when someone asks you about your church, when they ask you about your faith, when they ask you about why you are the way that you are, open that door, right? Take advantage of that opportunity to share with them. When somebody says something to you and they start asking you about your church, like, oh, I heard did you go to church somewhere? Don't be like, oh yeah, but you'd never want to come with me. You probably wouldn't want to do it. You're not a church kind of person. No, don't do that. If people start asking you questions about your church, say, hey, maybe they want to come. Maybe they have some interest inside of their heart, right? When somebody says something to you about, hey, why do you do that? Why have you talked to me? Why do you care about people? Why do you treat people that way? Don't be like, well, I'm just a good person. My mom gave it to me. I mean, it's just from my mother. No, I love your mom, but it's not from your mom. It's from Jesus. He changed your life. He transformed you, right? Walk through that door. Now, sometimes, or I say often, people aren't super direct. When they're interested, they kind of shade it or they kind of like hide it a little bit. So it's not likely that many of you are going to have a neighbor or a coworker come up to you and say, hey, could we go get coffee so you can tell me about your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? I want to believe in him, right? Some of you maybe have had that opportunity before. That's happened to me every once in a while. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, that's easy. Like, we can do that. That's awesome, right? But a lot of times it's going to come in a much more subtle way. Because here's the deal. People are searching for something. They do have problems. They do have issues. They do have struggles that are going on in them. And you're trying to figure that out. You're trying to look into that a little bit. Because people are weighed down by life. Walk through that door. At least crack it open a little bit. Knowing that as you have the conversation with people, some are going to accept what you say, some are going to reject what you say, and others aren't quite going to accept it yet, but they might through more time and relationship and conversations. We had a neighbor in our neighborhood that for a while, on a number of different occasions, she would just kind of ask about the church. She's like, yeah, you're a pastor. Like, where's your church located at? And I would talk to her and I would tell her about it. And then later we'd have another conversation about it. And all of a sudden, like, I could be a little slow on the uptick sometimes. And later I was like, Michelle, I think she wants to come. I should have realized that the first time she was asking me about it. She wasn't just being nice, she was interested in coming here. And after a number of conversations, she was like, hey, we need to make sure we're inviting her, that it's clear that we want her to come, that she's welcome to come. Here's when the services are. Here's when you should come. And since then, she's come a few times. It's unbelievable. Now, like I said, it took me a little while to realize what was going on there, but right, you're not going to be as dumb as I am, right? So you're gonna get it like the first time. Is there somebody that's like this in your life? Do you have somebody right now that, as you think back on conversations, you're like, I think they want to talk about faith. I think they have some interest in why I am the way that I am, or what church I go to, or what I'm a part of. I think there's something going on. I think they're kind of coming to me for that. Walk through the door. Ask the questions. Listen to them. Have the conversation with them. That's what Paul does here, which leads to the next thing that we see. Paul proceeds then to stand up and to give this message about Jesus, which is very similar to the message that Peter has given, but it's just nuanced to Paul's audience. So check out this message. If you can listen fast, I'm going to read this fairly fast, but it's in Acts chapter 13, starting in verse 16. Standing up, Paul motioned with his hand, and he said to them, fellow Israelites, and you Gentiles who worship God, listen to me. The God of the people of Israel chose our ancestors. He made the people prosper during their stay in Egypt. With mighty power, he led them out of that country. For about 40 years, he endured their conduct in the wilderness, and he overthrew 7 nations in Canaan, giving their land to his people as their inheritance. All this took about 450 years. What is Paul doing with the people? As he stands up in the Jewish synagogue to talk to them, and he's going to get to Jesus, but what is he doing? He's making connections with them, right? He's telling their story. He's like, I'm Jewish. This is my story. This is what we look to. I want to recite. I know the story. I'm a part of this story. Let me recount the story to you. He's connecting with them. After this, he says, God gave them judges until the time of Samuel the prophet. Then they asked for a king, and he gave them a king of the tribe of Benjamin. After removing Saul, he made David their king. God testified concerning David, I found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He'll do everything I want him to do. Paul gets to David. He keys in on one of the key figures for them, the greatest king Israel ever had, the height of their kingdom and their prosperity, the one they revere and they look to, this man after God's own heart. And Paul goes right for that. He's connecting with them. He's identifying with them. And then he draws a quick line to Jesus, verse 23. From this man's descendants, God has brought to Israel the Savior Jesus, as he promised. He goes on to talk about John the Baptist and how John the Baptist got the way ready for Jesus, the Savior of the world to come. Then he says this in verse 26, fellow children of Abraham and you God-fearing Gentiles, it is to us that this message of salvation has been sent. The people of Israel and their rulers did not recognize Jesus, yet in condemning him, they fulfilled the words of the prophets that are read every Sabbath. Though they found no proper ground for a death sentence, they asked Pilate to have him executed. When they had carried out all that was written about him, they took him down from the cross. They laid him in a tomb, but God raised him from the dead. And for many days he was seen by those who had traveled with him from Galilee to Jerusalem. They are now his witnesses to our people. Now notice a couple of things. What Paul is doing here is he makes connections, is he is drawing a line from their history, from their story to the modern day story, to evidences, to true facts of things that happened that they could verify down to this day. And he gets to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. This is the same message. Our message has never changed from the very beginning of time. The center, the pinnacle, our great hope is the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And Paul gets there, but he makes connections with the people to identify with them, to lead them up to this point, to use even some logic and rhetoric to help them see, this is our story. Jesus is the answer that you have been looking for. Verse 32, he says, we tell you the good news. What God promised our ancestors, he has fulfilled for us, their children, by raising up Jesus. And then he goes and quotes some Psalms. Now, why would he go back to the Old Testament scripture and quote Psalms? More connections. He understands that the authority for the people of God is the scriptures. They call it the Hebrew Scriptures. We call it the Old Testament Scriptures. They believe the Psalms are the very word from God. And so he goes back and he quotes a couple of Psalms to show that they were talking not about David as the greatest king, but about Jesus as the greatest king who would conquer death. And then he says this in verse 36. Now, when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep, which is a nice way of saying that he died. He was buried with his ancestors, and his body decayed, but the one whom God raised from the dead, Jesus, he did not see decay. What Paul is doing here the entire time with his audience is he is making connections and pointing to Jesus. Connect with your audience and point to Jesus. When he's in the synagogue, he's talking with people who believe in God. And so he tells their story, the story they know, and shows Jesus is the pinnacle of that story. He quotes their authorities, the Old Testament Scriptures. He appeals to one of their greatest heroes, David, and shows that David wasn't the ultimate hero. There had to be another one that was coming that wouldn't see death. That's Jesus. In other words, he meets them where they are, makes connections, and gets to Jesus. Now later, this is interesting, we're going to see him do the same kind of thing, but to a couple of non-Jewish audiences. We'll see that a little bit next week, and we'll see it when he goes to Athens as well. And when he meets with these non-Jewish crowds, he doesn't tell the Old Testament story because it's not quite as much the story of the people that he's speaking to. He makes connections to the people that will make sense with them. So he quotes their authorities. He quotes poets and philosophers of their day. He understands where they are at, and he draws a line from that, from what's in people's hearts and what's in their conscience and what's in creation, to the God who created them. And he gets to Jesus from there. Now look, what does this mean for us? It means that you have friends and family members that don't know Jesus, but they have issues. They have questions. They have problems. They have authorities in their life that they look to. Start there. Listen to their story. Get to know them. Get to know the issues that keep them from believing in Jesus, the hang-ups maybe that they have with Christianity. Get a sense of where they are coming from. Get a sense of who they trust and look for connections with them. And then consider how Jesus answers that question, how Jesus answers those issues, those needs in their life. Now, we don't have time to delve into this, but we could do a number of messages on what are those issues that people are dealing with. What are the hang-ups that they have with Christianity? And so I don't have time for you to go through that, but I want to give you a couple of book recommendations. I've recommended these before. I'm going to recommend them again. Two of the best books that have been written probably in the last 10 years on what we call apologetics, understanding our faith and the hang-ups that people have with faith in Jesus. They're by the same author, Rebecca McLaughlin. She wrote this book, Confronting Christianity, and then she wrote it for teens. 10 questions every teen should ask and answer about Christianity. Two of my girls have read it, been extremely helpful for them and for our family. They're in the bookstore. You can pick them up there. You can pick them up from Amazon. If this is something and you're dealing with somebody that's got issues and hang-ups with Christianity, these are the books to read. I couldn't more highly recommend them. But here's the thing. In addition to these books, you know what it's really a matter of? It's a matter of knowing the person and knowing Jesus. It's a matter of you truly knowing what's going on in this person's life, having a conversation and a relationship with them, getting to know them, and then sharing what Jesus has done in your life. We've talked about this before, but that woman at the well that Jesus met in John chapter 4, he has one conversation with her, and she becomes one of the greatest evangelists of all time. She goes back into her city, and you know what she told the people in her city? Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he be the Messiah? She didn't even mention the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus yet. Now, they had to get there, they had to get to that, but she just brought them to Jesus. Can you bring someone to Jesus by sharing what he's done in your life? And then over time, you can grow to know Jesus more, to maybe read a couple books like this and read his word a little bit more to sharpen up on rhetoric and arguments and understanding and those kinds of things. But you just need to know people, and you need to know Jesus. Which leads to our final way to participate in the mission of Jesus. The key connection that every single person needs, the key connection that you needed in your life is this. What you are looking for is found in Jesus. What you're looking for is found in Jesus. Look at verse 38, how Paul says this. He says, "Therefore, my friends, I want you to know that through Jesus, the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. Through him, everyone who believes is set free from every sin, a justification you were not able to obtain under the law of Moses." Paul shows them why Jesus is good news. And that's what gospel means. It means good news, right? That's our message. And Paul shows them here why Jesus is good news. See, they were a religious people that are always trying to please God through everything they did, by keeping the rules, by going to church, by praying the prayers, by offering the sacrifices, by being good people. And Paul says now, you know that was an endless striving for what you could never obtain. You were constantly trying to grasp it, to get it, to obtain it, to stay in that place where you're like, God is happy with me, I have favor with God, everything's gonna be okay. And it's like you're always striving and you're never quite able, you just can't hold it in your hands for very long. You just can't grasp it. Now this is a really, really terrible illustration, but I don't know if any of you grew up with Pac-Man, playing the Pac-Man video game, right? Like the old school arcade Pac-Man. Whenever I'm in an arcade and I see the Pac-Man, I was like, I want to play the Pac-Man. But here's the problem with the Pac-Man game. You can only beat like 2 boards on that stinking game, right? You can't get very far in the game. And always, I want to be really good at Pac-Man. And I want to go to board 4. I want to go when all the ghosts get super fast. I can never get there, right? 10,000 points, maybe that's my max, right? It's an endless striving for what you will never be able to obtain, right? That's what it is. You can never quite get there. You have things in your life like that. Things you try to figure out, things you try to get to. You're like, I'm gonna beat this game. I'm gonna get there, and you can't. And you can't get the top score. You can't win Fortnite. You can't, whatever your thing is, right? You've got things in your life, adults as well, that you're always striving for, you're always hoping to get, and you never quite get there. Look, for most people that live in this life, they have an endless striving for the deepest things that they need in their lives that they can never get a hold of, that they can never obtain. But here's the thing that you know, Jesus can do what you could not do. Jesus was perfect for you. That's what Paul does in this message, in this final invitation and offer to the people he's speaking to. Look, Jesus was perfect for you. He fulfilled all the requirements. He did all of the righteousness. He kept all of the law. And then he gave up his life to exchange places with you. When Paul talks about justification here and he offers that to the people, that's what Jesus did, the word justification means that you are made right with God. That Jesus Christ, through coming down to this earth and giving up his life on the cross as a perfect human, the only one ever to perfectly follow the will of God, gave up his righteousness on that cross. He absorbed all of your sin and failure into himself, and he transfers his righteousness to you through faith in him. We call this substitutionary atonement. That's what Jesus did on the cross, so that he can give you what you could have never obtained by your works, by your prayers alone, by your sacrifices, by your church attendance, by trying to be a good person. Jesus did for you what you could not do. And this is what every Jewish person longed for, to be right with God. Do you know at the end of the day, whether you see it or not, that's what you long for? To be right with God, to be at peace with God, to be free from striving, to be forgiven for not being good enough. Let me ask you this, what are you looking for? In life, what are you looking for? What is your deepest desire? What do you think your friends, your family members are looking for? Deep down. It comes in a lot of different forms, you know. But at the end of the day, it's always something like peace, freedom from shame, wholeness, happiness, joy, to be loved. Most people have a sense that their current life is not providing any of those things, that they're always trying to grasp it and they can never possess it. Religion in itself can make you weary in that striving. Your own standard of perfection and earning can wear you out. And the shame of your past can cripple you. The answer to all of those issues, all this striving, is not to say to you, hey, that's not a big deal. Just get over it. It's fine. Don't let anybody else tell you who you are, what to do. Don't let anybody else make you feel guilty. You shouldn't have guilt about that. Just get over it. It's fine. Be and do whatever you want to be and do, and you will be fine. That's really what you need. As much as you might tell yourself that, your heart won't let you off the hook, and you know it. You know it when you're alone with your own thoughts and what your heart is telling you. Your heart is saying, that's not enough. It's not enough just to say, just get over this. It's going to be okay. Your heart knows better. You know what the true answer is? The true answer is Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. It's the song that we just sang. That is the answer. God, holy, perfect, just creator, came down to this earth as a human, lived a perfect life, and gave up that life on a cross so that you could have life, so that you could know the God who created you, so you could know the place of true peace and joy and hope. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean every single day is actually sweeter than the day before with Jesus. That's not actually true. It's not always like that. It's hard sometimes. But it's not something that you obtain by working hard, by praying enough. It comes by trusting in the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ for you. And that is where true peace and love and acceptance and hope and forgiveness, Paul says, so that you will be set free. It's not no big deal. It's you are forgiven and set free by Jesus. So look, if you're here today or you're listening to this and you have not trusted in Jesus Christ and given him your life, I invite you to believe in him today and let him change you. And if you are here today and you said, yeah, I've trusted in Jesus, this is the truth, the hope that I hold to, my encouragement to you is to be filled up with this grace. What Paul offers us here is the reality that as followers of Jesus, we get to live in, that we are forgiven, that we are set free, that we are justified before God. The God of the universe looks at you and says, you are holy. You are righteous. You don't always act righteous. You don't always act, you know that, right? We don't have to try to just nudge somebody. We don't even have to prove it. You know that you're not always holy. You know how God looks at you if you've trusted in Jesus? You're holy. You're righteous because of what Jesus has done for you. And look, if we live in that, if we believe that, as followers of Jesus, is there anything else to live for? Right? But to participate in the mission of Jesus, to participate in his very heart, that's what Paul shows us here. We all have a role in the mission of Jesus, being filled up with this grace, with this truth, and letting that drive our lives as we engage the people around us, as we participate in Jesus' mission to the ends of the earth by supporting, encouraging, and praying for those that have left their homes to take the message of Jesus around the world. The creator of all things has invited us to participate in what he is doing. Would you pray with me?